Welcome to Sharing Hope. I am your host, Jamie George, and our guest today is Mr. Ken Coleman. Ken is the #1 national best-selling author of The Proximity Principle, the proven strategy that will lead to the career you love. He's also the author of One Question, Life-Changing Answers from Today's Leading Voices. At Ramsey Solutions, he hosts the Ken Coleman Show, a nationally syndicated radio show, part of the Ramsey Network, that airs in more than 35 cities across the U.S. every weekday. I've known Ken a long time. This is a privilege to have him with us on the show. Welcome, Mr. Ken Coleman.
Jamie, it's always fun to talk with you. It's just weird that we're talking to each other through video because normally we hang out. We probably live about 5 miles from each other. This is weird, but fun as well.
So how are you surviving, by the way? How are you making it through the quarantine? Your hair looks fantastic. So other than not having a haircut in 2 months, right. Yeah. How are you surviving?
Well, it's interesting. I'm thriving, and I think it's important to point out why that is. First of all, Dave Ramsey and I had the distinction of being essential, which I think is such a silly term, and so we make fun of it around here. But because we had live radio shows, we get to come into work every day, and so we didn't miss a day of work throughout this, and have not. And so from that standpoint, I'm extremely blessed to not have had this massive routine disruption, because you've got this global pandemic, health crisis, and then you've got this economic crisis that is a function of the health crisis. And so you've got all this uncertainty that every one of us has had to deal with. What does this mean? How's it going to affect me? And so then you take on top of all of that uncertainty around, am I going to get sick? If I get sick, will I survive? And then am I going to get fired? Or if I get furloughed, all that together. And then you throw your routine into a completely different thing. That is a really unstable, unsettling time. And so I'm really blessed that my routine didn't change much. I went in a little bit later because the kids were home from school. And so I got to spend a little bit more time with them in the morning than I normally would. But we're thriving because, at Ramsey Solutions, Jamie, you know us well, you know Dave well. We were validated in this time, and we are being validated. I
was going to say, for how many years you guys are saying, look, what's 6 months away? People have to be kind of excited for those of you who have been journeying with you guys for so long, going, I'm so glad I have disciplined myself to really put some stuff away to help in the crisis. Yeah. And then, of course, you have the others who are going, I wanted to, or I started to, or I tried, and gosh, I'm so disappointed I didn't. Maybe there was even some shame, like, ugh. What do you say to people who are in that point of tension right now where they didn't quite get put away what they wanted to, or maybe they're even feeling some like, I wish I would have listened to what Dave and Ken and the guys were saying over there. What are your words of encouragement right now, like in real time?
Yeah, don't beat yourself up. You're not going to do yourself any good, or the people that count on you any good, by kind of wallowing in the fact that, boy, shoulda, coulda, woulda. The reality is that we're in this moment. You're not alone. This is a global economic situation. So, swallow your pride. Yeah. And it's about short-term thinking, and then we shift to long-term thinking. So what I'm telling my audience is that your dream, your vision for your life, the dream job, the purpose that you were put on this planet to do in your work, and we talk about that contributing through your work, none of that's gone away. That hasn't evaporated. Now, has the timeline been changed? Absolutely it has. And so you've got to have this, okay, look, I've had a massive disruption. And so this disruption has created some new realities. And in the short term, they are affecting me this way. And if we're talking about your job, then that's a really, really intense thing. And so what we want you to do is focus on the short term. So Dave has taught, this, Jamie, so well, the 4 walls are really your priorities when you're in some type of financial struggle. So your 4 walls, obviously your food, you got to eat. Then we're talking about your shelter, that's rent or mortgage, and then your utilities to be able to function in that shelter, and then finally transportation. So if you're in a really desperate situation financially, your focus goes from not the long term and the grief, the frustration that's attached to that timeline being changed. You're going to shift over to, hey, I got to do this right now. Like, this is what I know, and I'm going to focus on what I can control. And so you're swallowing your pride, because this isn't about you. And if you're delivering pizzas or you're working at an Amazon fulfillment plant and driving that truck, or you're doing whatever it takes right now, 3 or 4 jobs just to survive this storm, then when the storm passes, and it will, and it is, then you begin to make the steps to, okay, how do I shift to the long-term strategy again? And so that can really ease a lot of the anxiety and the unknown when you're focused on what you have to do. There's a great line from one of my favorite movies of all time called The Great Debaters, about a small black college debate team, and Forrest Whitaker plays the father of one of the young men. And there's some tension in the movie at one point, and this kid only wants to do the debate team. He's not kind of doing his homework. He's not doing what dad wants him to do on his studies, because all he wants to do is debate. And they get in a fight, and his dad says to him as he storms out of the house, "You do what you have to do so you can do what you want to do." And I think that's a wonderful line. And I think that it's a mantra that I think a lot of people need to adapt to, and kind of make it your entire theme and your entire perspective in times of crisis. Control the controls. Do what you have to do. Then you focus on doing what you want to do.
I love that. It's so good. Can you go to a time in your life where you experienced that, where there was maybe you had a vision for what you wanted to do, there was a creative outlet, there was a thing, but before you could get to that, because I've been asking a lot of folks, hey, go to another time in your life where there was uncertainty and you had to make it through it. But I love this. I mean, for you, because this is such great advice for us, could you tell a story of how you came through that? You had to really follow that same advice.
Yeah, so the story well. It's about the time that we really, got to know each other well. And I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, working for John Maxwell, positioned in a leadership position there to essentially have the resume credibility to potentially run for office, state house or state senate, feeling that the call in my life from the age of 16 was to run for political office and serve the public in that role. And I began to have a real crisis of belief in that calling and vision. And as you know, some circumstances came together, kind of pushed me out of the nest. And so I'm sitting there going, okay, now's the time to figure out what this is. And the crucible moment of uncertainty in my life was when I got really clear that, okay, it's not politics. I'm going to move the focus to broadcasting, but I'm not 100% sure. Is it hard news? Is it sports talk? Is it, just knowing I think I'm supposed to be in broadcasting, and getting some real clarity there, enough to confidently say, okay, I'm going to go after this. And then you get to that point. It's kind of exhilarating when you get to that moment of realization. You go, okay, I feel really good about this. And then you go, oh, it's the equivalent of going, that's the mountain I want to climb. You get all excited that you identify the mountain. Then you go, oh, crud. Now I got to figure out how to actually climb the mountain.
Then you get to the base and look up.
That's it. And it was there where I was, honestly, Jamie, I was months and months and months of being overwhelmed with doubt. Do I have what it takes to actually climb this? Can I get there? I'm 31 years of age. I don't have a degree in broadcast journalism. I've never done any real broadcasting at all. All I've ever done is act like a ham on a stage. And so you begin to doubt. Am I delusional? Is this some sort of ego thing? And all this kind of stuff. And then you overcome with fear. Am I going to fail miserably in this process and put my family behind the financial 8-ball, as it were? And so it was just a complete cloud, man, of uncertainty of, can I get there? Even if I have what it takes, can I even figure out how to get there? And it was this constant crisis, kind of fear and doubt on my shoulder. And it was about a year and a half where I really sat, I think, close to idle. I made some moves and put myself out there and got rejected a few times. And that only made it worse, because it's not fun being told no. Especially when you're the product. If I try to sell you something, a product or service, and you say no, I might be disappointed in that because I didn't get the sale.
Yeah.
It's not personal.
But when it's you,
when you're the product and you go do something and they go, no, it's like, it's awful.
But you survived, and not just survived, you thrived. And I watched you make pivots along the way where, okay, I'm going to do this. And then, this other opportunity happened. And there were moments where it was that I'm going to do what I have to do what I want to do. As you gained experience, as you met people and networked in other places, how did you survive that whole season to come to where you are today?
Yeah. I'm so glad you asked this, because this is really my favorite question to answer, because I think it's the same for you all that it was for me. And I got to the point that I wanted the future more than anything.
Mhm.
And so I started to weigh the cost. And so if I keep putting myself out there and I get rejected, that really stings, and that's not fun. If I have to be more patient and I got to deal with the agony of waiting, that's okay, because the idea of not going for it was way more painful than the pain of rejection and the pain of failure. And it just got to that point where I really, really got super clear along the way. I had some good men in my life.
Mm.
Pete Richardson, I don't know if you know Pete, but
Mm-mm.
Pete's a legendary kind of life coach, and a guy that met me on the journey and helped reinforce what I had already done. And so that really helped. And candidly, I had to get to a point where I adopted my own faith.
Mm.
I grew up in a pastor's household. I'm not the black sheep. I don't have this kind of negative relationship with the church. But while that's a wonderful environment that I grew up in, because my parents' faith was so strong, I didn't really have to have a whole lot of faith. If I'm being really vulnerable right now, and I'm going to go ahead and be vulnerable because the cat's out of the bag. And so you get to this point where you go, either I'm going to adopt my own faith and be a big boy here, put my big boy pants on, and really wrestle with this unknown. Because that's the hardest thing as humans that we face, is the unknown. I can accept risk, but I know that, well, I could do this and I could have this happen. But when we don't know how it's going to happen and when it's going to happen, that is a paralyzing fear. And you have to have faith to overcome it. So I got to tell you, it got to the point, Jamie, where I dreamed about it enough, and I tasted a little bit of it by observing and watching other people. And I became consumed with studying people that I wanted to be like. And that helped with the faith, right? And so I began to create an appetite while trusting that I was doing the right thing and trusting God. But I also created an appetite where I craved it. And so it got to the point where it's like, if I don't do this, and I'm 75 years of age, the pain of never going for it is going to be way worse than the pain of today.
Gosh, and I so resonate with that feeling. As you know, I've stepped into kind of a new season in creating this show in town. And that all the energy you're describing is that same energy. It got to the point where I'm like, if I don't do this, I'll be miserable and I will live an unfulfilled life. It almost becomes like, sometimes I think we throw around this term called calling, this, but it feels like that, like a divine, like God's fingers hitting your chest, like, no, this isn't an option. No. And maybe not everybody gets that kind of clarity, but when you do, it's hard to do anything else, isn't it? And is sometimes the faith journey stepping into does the nature of actually showing up repeatedly actually bring the clarity?
Yeah, it does, actually. That's why I wrote the proximity principle, because as I look back on my journey, Jamie, I wasn't really good at doing a whole lot of things the right way. That's why I teach what I teach now, is I figured out all the wrong ways to do it. But
don't do it like that.
That's right. But one of the things that I was really good at, and quite frankly, you're really good at this too, is that I was really good at the intentionality of identifying the right people in the right places and then putting myself around the right people and in the right places. I've always been really good at that. And I'll just be honest with you, folks, that's the secret sauce.
There is something about proximity. Gosh, I'm so glad you wrote this book, because I've talked with people, we're in an entertainment town, music in particular. Of course, that's expanding here in Nashville. But if you go, I really want to be a part of a band. I really want to do a thing. Yeah, well, if you don't leave Des Moines, and if you don't leave Buffalo, and you don't leave Lynchburg, and you don't leave these other cities, like, there's something about being around the greatest musicians of all time. There's something about being give us something else from that book that we can hold on to in this time of uncertainty, since proximity is something that's limited regarding what we can go do.
Well,
Guide us and
I'm
encourage
glad you asked me this because I'll take you to the first place we write about in the book. There's 5 archetypes of people, as you know, and then there's 5 places. And the first place is the place that most people, we've gotten more comments about this place than any other in the book because it was a little bit of a, I got you, wink, wink. And you actually sort of led me into it really beautifully there. And it's the place where you are.
it.
So most people have this concept, this idea that I've got to move somewhere to go somewhere in my career. And there is a time where that is in fact the case. And what you were saying is true. Like at some point, you probably should look at going to Nashville, or you should look at going to New York or LA or whatever. However, there's a time for that. But for the person who is sitting there right now and they're listening to this and they're going, well, man, I am in Red Dirt, Idaho.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm a town of 400 people. We got one stoplight and it didn't even work half the time. How do I get there? Well, therein lies the place. Start where you are. And I call it the law of the zip code. The law of the zip code, can you tell I work for Maxwell? The law of the zip code says that everything you need to get started is already around you. Now, understand the operating word there is started. So, okay, to get started could be as simple as going, I'm going to do some research. I'm going to figure out what are the 3, 4, 5 best ways to potentially get up that mountain. I didn't have to move anywhere to come up with that. And then I'll get that information and I can begin to put a plan together, right? And we look at, okay, what do I need to learn and do? That's education and experience. How much is that going to cost me? And how much time is that going to take? Oh, by the way, you can do that in your easy chair and your pajama pants. You can answer those questions and come up with that. All right, so I'm having some fun with this, but we now look at, okay, wait a second. Can I begin to get around some professionals even if I live in Red Dirt, Idaho? Yes, I'll remind you, my interview style is largely, and Jamie, you know this, is largely ripped off of 3 people: Bob Costas, David Frost, and Larry King Live. I may be one of the only people on the planet that has watched every episode of Larry King Live. I have a box set of DVDs in my reading room.
You might be. That's true. The only person.
And I'm not kidding you when I say
that's amazing.
So I learned, I've never met Bob Costas. I've never met Larry King. But those guys shaped my interview style. And as you know, my backstory, that's how I got into broadcasting, was being part of a nationally recognized leadership conference. And I created a podcast just so I could get a chance to interview people because I was fascinated with interviewing. And so anyway, all that said is that I can learn and do even in my little teeny tiny zip code. And let's take a bigger town. Let's say you're in a town of 50, 60,000 people and you want to get into production, video production. Well, I'm telling you, there's a video production company in your town. I'm just telling you.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you want to use the proximity principle. That's the producer in the book. They're successful. They're running their own company. Coffee, lunch, whenever, the COVID panic is done and people have a cup of coffee with you, but go do it and sit there and act like you're doing a college research paper on that person.
Have you, I was going to say, have you found that people who've had some level of success, they actually enjoy giving it away? Like sometimes we're intimidated, like I'm afraid to ask to go to coffee, or maybe, how do I know that guy will want to meet with me? But have you found that especially older people, 50s, 60s, they're actually going, hey, I want to leave a legacy, and that it might seem intimidating to ask, but it's not. People often respond. Would that be your experience?
Absolutely. It's 9.5 out of 10 times. And the half is when somebody's had a really bad day. Catch them at the wrong time and they
right.
But that's what I mean. I've said it like this in other interviews. Very successful people didn't get there on their own. And so they realize when a younger person or a person who admires them, looks up to them, and wants to be a human sponge around them, number one, they realize automatically that somebody did that for them one time or 2 times or 7 times or 50 times.
Yeah.
And number 2, let's just be really gut level honest, because I mentioned this a lot on the show to take the fear away from asking this question. Can I spend some time with you? There's not a greater compliment in the world than somebody asking you your opinion on how you got where you are. People want to talk about themselves. It's just a part of the human condition. Yeah. So I think those 2 factors are going to put you in a really good situation. And then, the feeling I always got, Jamie, from somebody that I looked up to and was way more successful than me, and by the way, still the case, is, hey, the water's really nice over here. Come on in. And, I got to do this with Marcus Buckingham 6 months ago. Marcus and I have shared a stage before. I've interviewed him in front of thousands of people. I've interviewed him probably 8 times on all these different podcasts and things that I've done, but I've never really spent real time with Marcus. And I look up to Marcus. Marcus Buckingham has had about as much professional influence on me as anybody on the planet, because I believe in the strengths-based revolution, and that's how I treated high school, my poor parents. I was doing that before it was a thing, focusing on the subjects I was good at, and I ignored everything else. It's terrible for my parents, but I look up to Marcus, and Marcus is about 10 years older than me. And I was in LA doing media about 6 months ago, and I knew how to get in touch with him, but I never had before. And I just reached out and just said, hey man, you've had tremendous influence on me, more than you could possibly know. I'm doing some really fun stuff and some projects that are influenced by you. And man, I'll tell you, if I could get 30 minutes or 60 minutes with you, just to say thank you. We spent time on the stage together. We've never had a real conversation. Man, I'd just love to hang with you and get your insight on some things that I'm planning, because I don't want to do them if you think they're bad ideas. And what do you think Marcus's response was? Dude, absolutely. And he gave me more than an hour. An hour in, and his assistant came in and said, hey, you got something else? And he went, let's reschedule that.
Wow.
Where did it come from? Because I'm delightful and charismatic? No.
I don't know. I'd argue that you are delightful.
My point is, I walked in there, true story, with a moleskin and a pencil, and I interviewed that dude.
Yeah.
About what he's done and why he does it that way. And then here's some ideas. Do you think this is a good idea? Tear it apart. I gave him license to shoot my ideas down. Again, that's the approach. That's the posture.
Because successful people, they love the audacity, don't they? And the humility that says, I don't know it. Like you're teachable.
Yeah, like, hey, you have forgotten more than I might ever learn or do.
Right.
Who doesn't respond to that? I mean, It is a hunger, and humility is really the 2 H words that you're approaching folks with. I think if you do that, the humility is, part of the gratitude for their time. But just the straight up hunger, man. I mean, even if you're faking it, the first 2 sentences out of their mouth, it needs to be like, yeah. I don't even care what you're writing down, because they will respond to that.
Yes. And I love what you're saying. It doesn't matter what town you're in, what city you're in. Go find someone who's an expert at what they do and ask them to tell you their story, give you their time. And 9 times out of 10, they're gonna.
Yeah.
I love that. So Ken, for you, kind of things are starting to change. We're in Nashville, the band's starting to lift, that sort of thing. When you look ahead, what do you have any? Because I know you and I, we like the sociology of it all. What how will people respond? What are patterns of human behavior? What do you think? Do you think coming out of this, people will be different? Will the generation that went through the quarantine see the world slightly different? What are some of the positive? Because we hear a lot of the negative in the news. Are there any positives that you think will shape kind of the way we enter the world? There's maybe some good takeaways that we'll carry with us as we walk forward.
Well, I think this is a positive. Some people listening to this might not think this is a positive, but I think this is a positive. And I think you're going to see the Generation Z, also called the Mosaics. So these are the kids in high school, and then probably people in their first year of work, 21, 22, 23, I think is about the cutoff there. And I think you're going to see that group, particularly this group that is coming out of college right now, and those that are coming out of high school right now. They'll be the ones the most affected by this. And then what they will do is model the way for the classes behind them. And here's the shift. I think it's really positive. I think the real positive shift here is a lot of people are going to go, you know what? There's always been this cultural, societal pressure for me to go to college. I had some questions about it, largely because I'm not sure what in the world I want to do. Or I have an idea what I want to do, and I'm not sure that there's a degree that actually prepares me for that. And I just watched my mom and dad or my grandparents who had the fancy degrees from the big time school just get ceremoniously laid off or furloughed. And I'm watching all these dudes on the side of the road laying bricks and welding and doing all kinds of things in the trade, and they're as busy as they've ever been. I think you're going to see some of these kids, and a good portion of them, go, you know what, this is a new economy. And I've always had this entrepreneurial spirit. I'm going to go straight out of high school into the workforce and get the chops, the experience, and I'm with the eye on doing my own thing. And I think that's a positive for this reason. I'd hate to see that kid go to a school that they don't want to go to, get a degree that they didn't want and that they couldn't afford, and be sapped with student loan debt, and then come out and try to spend the next 15 years paying off that debt and keeping up with the Joneses in a job that they can't stand to go to on Monday morning, because that's the caller I'm talking to every day.
Wow,
I think you're going to see a shift there, a big shift. I think that's a positive thing, where people are going to start to question the societal norms that are so-called requirements for me to be successful. I think that's a major, major shift. The second thing that's really positive that I think you're going to see is, I do think you'll see that younger generation who, by the way, by the data, the millennials are already pretty averse to debt. It was risk averse. They were like, we're not doing debt. I think you're going to see even more of that coming out of this. And I think you're going to see a more responsible consumer. And I'm not saying everybody, but I think you'll see a greater percentage of people that are going to be responsible financially. And that leads to the third thing. I also think you're going to see businesses shift. And I think you're going to see things like, all the travel for meetings all the time and all that, and the amount of hundreds of thousands of dollars. So there's going to be a little bit of a negative thing there as it relates to certain service industries. But as a whole, I just think you're going to see a much more streamlined business person and a streamlined worker. I think that's going to be a real positive coming out of this, because things we did in the past, we just did because everybody else did it.
Right.
And I think this pause and suppression, Jamie, is really making people question the normal rhythms. And we're like, did we have to do that?
Right. Totally. Well, thank you for your insight on that. And Ken, it's so good. The stuff on proximity, I anticipate some of our listeners going, gosh, that's so helpful for me right now, thinking about the future. Who can I go learn from? And in this case, in today's world, who can I just call up? I just use my FaceTime. Like, who's somebody I can reach out to? So thanks for your insight today. If people want to catch up with you, hear your show, find your stuff, where would they go?
Yeah, the easiest place is kencoleman.com. It's got all the connections to listen, whether it's SiriusXM, watch it live stream on YouTube, of course, around the country on syndicated radio stations, the podcast. We've got all the social media connections. We've got 3 free Get Hired guides, a lot of content that's free there at kencoleman.com. So that's the best place to connect.
Good. Beautiful. Well, good to see you, my friend, as always.